Welcome to part 7 of the philosophy of the Ananke. This is your author, Lance Gordon. Hope you've enjoyed the other parts that have been uploaded so far. If you wish to be notified when another module is uploaded, and I have an estimate that it's going to be about 30 or 33 modules altogether, then please subscribe. Press the subscribe button on the bottom. From your perspective, bottom left, I think it is, but you'll see it. And if you're a member of YouTube, then you will be notified. All right, so let's continue with what we're doing here. The lesson of fate versus free will is the concept of Ananke, suggesting that we are determined and fated such that there is no rational room for free will. Are we free? Are we fated? Could we have both? Let us examine these obvious extremes to the situation of our conscious control. Pure fate could be considered a logic so suffocating that our every move is predetermined, preordained in some logical way that evades our perception. In other words, our decided actions do not matter, since our decisions are controlled by this fate. On the other hand, pure free will would be considered, or could be considered, the ability to determine our own outcomes to the point of our precise birth and death. We could control every bodily function to enormous precision. We could think any feeling we desired at any moment in time. We could be ecstatic and infatuated with life, at our whim. Everything could be our choice. It should be obvious that we have neither powers to the extremes mentioned above. We cannot think ourselves to death at the command of another person. We cannot control our bodily functions to the precision of stopping our kidneys from operating or our liver from doing its job, at least for any length of time. Nor are we determined to be robots. Sorry, just trying to get the next page. We seem to have a choice in life. We have some control over our bodily functions, otherwise there'd be no need for public restrooms, since we would relieve ourselves at a moment's notice. Even cats control their bodily functions while waiting to go to the cat litter box. So, all things seem to have the elements of free will and fate interacting in their lives. The question is, how do they mix? And how do they relate to the Ananke? It is simple. The four fundamental patterns of Ananke paint a picture of bounded chaos, perhaps free will in a way of speaking, which undulates between the extremes until equilibrium is found. Here lies our answer. The boundaries, the extremes that strain the order, are our fate. We cannot pass these boundaries without infinite energy. We are determined within these boundaries, these opposing forces. We cannot exist in an extreme state for any significant length of time. We are influenced by pain and negative emotions to return to the desired balancing point, the moderate position which lies somewhere between the extremes in question. The state of balance being determined for us as well. So fate can be considered the boundaries in life that we can strain but can never break, and the influenced tranquility point where the reward of happiness prevails. On the other hand, our free will can be considered those actions that we choose to do within the fated constraints. We are influenced by our logic and emotions to find the evasive balancing points, but we are not commanded to find them. It is our choice. We can choose to feel more or less pain. It is up to us to realize Ananke and follow its way. The lesson of moderation versus extremism. Does the Ananke suggest that we all should be mediocre? Are extremes always bad? Do they always lead to imbalance? According to Aristotle, the mean between the two extremes is the virtuous or right act. He strongly urged moderation in all things. The extremes always cause imbalance, whether it be the extreme of deficiency or that of excess. This does not mean that we should be second-rate. For example, courage is the moderate position between cowardice and foolhardiness. Self-discipline or temperance is the moderate position between loss of control over our senses and temperance, and having ultimate control as if we felt no sensation at all, insensibility. Gentleness is halfway between indifference and hot-temperedness. Lastly, ambition is the mean between laziness and over-aggressiveness. In summary, moderation is the balancing point of the Ananke. Moderation in all things, including moderation, will produce peace and tranquility for all involved. The moderate act is doing the right thing to the right person, at the right time, to the right extent, with the right goal, done in the right manner. Moderation is not mediocrity. It is not within the reach of the average person. Only those of us who are equipped with the knowledge and ability to make the right choice will be capable of this goal. Remember, the center of a circle is a highly unlikely spot to choose by chance alone. That's analogous to the moderate point, the moderation point. On the other hand, most of us are extremists. We either get obsessed with work and become workaholics, or become lazy and totally unproductive. In essence, extremism is mediocrity, while moderation is superiority. We can practice moderation and go with the flow, or we can remain at our extremes and experience pain. The choice is ours. The lesson of materialism, namely the poor versus the rich. By now we should be aware that our primary purpose is to seek the feeling of happiness which emerges from a state of balance that we are free to acquire within certain fated constraints. Fated. We are signaled that we have arrived at this moderate position when we feel a state of relaxation and contentment. But what about materialism? Certainly we cannot be happy until all share equally in the wealth of the world. Doesn't balance for all imply the need to have equal shares? Not really. Case in point will enlighten us. Let us take the case of water. Each of us may require some water in order to bathe and quench the thirst of our bodies, and this may produce a good feeling that adds to our pleasure. It allows us to be clean, thirst-free, and refreshed in the summer months. If an individual were greedy and hoarded water, wouldn't we feel that he was stupid and unwise? He would be wasting his time on a nonsense venture when the fundamental need of cleanliness and thirst would be satisfied by so little. He would indeed be a fool as long as the water remained in abundance. On top of this, if this same individual sacrificed his time and resources to acquire this possession at the expense of his family, friends, and health, wouldn't we feel him to be a double fool? Is it unfair that he possessed more water than anyone else? Would he really be rich? The above example suggests, or analogous example that I was using there, the above example suggests that a balance of material wealth lies in the functional needs of food, shelter, clothing, and perhaps transportation for ourselves and our family. More food, better shelter, better clothing, and better transportation are nice to have, but not at the expense of the other dimensions in our lives. The marginal positive feelings that we temporarily acquire are not worth a long-term negative sacrifice. Anyone having a goal of wealth is bound to be unhappy, since his resource of time is being redirected to marginal, transient feelings. Is it not better to go with the Ananke and keep all in balance while achieving a career that serves the purpose of balance for others? Sure, we may earn less money, but we will maximize our state of tranquility and peace. Is this not what we really want to achieve? Don't we want to be rich in feelings? So we can consider the material balance to be the point where we achieve having enough food to eat without getting fat, having enough clothes to wear in proportion to our occupations, having safe shelter, and having transportation that doesn't break down that often. I believe that a lot of us are at that point already. We are materially rich. Our unhappiness does not come from the lack of money. Our unhappiness comes from the other dimensions in our lives that are out of balance. We are going against the way of this Ananke. We lack feelings, not wealth. The Ananke seems to act as if it wants us to share equally in feelings. This does not necessarily require equality of possessions. Above our functional needs, more possessions are the profits and not the necessity of a happy life. Next page. One last point that I should like to make. It is apparent that many in this country and quite a few in the world have not achieved our state of luxury here in the United States. They are poor in money and sometimes in pain of spirit. For them, the world is out of balance on the material dimension. Until we invest in these people in such a way that they learn to get back into balance by helping themselves, we shall be haunted with feelings of guilt and helplessness. These feelings will diminish the level of happiness that we can achieve in this world. In priority, each one of us should help ourselves and others, if at all possible. Our food will taste better, our clothing will feel softer, our shelter will appear more tranquil, and our transportation will not bother us when it breaks down. Next section, expressions of the least negative way. At this point in our discussion of the Ananke, we have learned some of the manifestations of its patterns into what previously seemed to be unrelated concepts. We have become aware of the lessons of self-interest, womb service, the win-win principle, present awareness, the importance of relaxation, and the concept of fairness. All of these being mere extensions of the law of balance and harmony for all. Moreover, the lessons of stress, boredom, evil, sin, crime, love, and doing good were found to be manifestations of the law of negative and positive change. We found that the law of opposites reflected itself in the concepts of good versus evil, ugliness versus beauty, fate versus free will, moderation versus extremism, and the poor versus the rich. We have learned that the dimensions of our lives must be in balance in order to achieve the most happy solution. When balance is disrupted, the opposing forces come into play with the purpose of achieving balance once again. Since change is inevitable and conflict of interest likely, it becomes imperative to learn the lessons of the least negative, least destructive, most efficient way to recover from our state of temporary disharmony. The lesson of justice. What is justice? Is it not a process where inflicted disharmony is brought back to equilibrium in a least negative manner? When an individual goes against the law, does not the opposing forces bring him back into conformance, at least in a least destructive way? Is not the law of man an attempt to interpret the true law of Ananke as it applies to the society at large? I believe it is. Since disruption is inevitable, a most critical manifestation of Ananke as it applies to man becomes the interpretation of law, the interpreted law of behavior. Volumes have been written on Babylonian law, Egyptian law, Roman law, American law, and the like. Many nations, cultures, and religions have attempted to interpret the patterns of Ananke as it applies to man. Without realizing it, man tried to decode Ananke for this very precise reason, with the ultimate goal of peace throughout the world, utilizing international law. But once the interpreted law is abused, by intent or accident, what should happen? Should revenge take its destructive course? Should war be declared as a consequence of some minor misunderstanding? Of course not. It is against Ananke to cause such destruction, unless absolutely necessary. Instead, through man's wisdom, he invented a system whereby injustice could be rectified in a least negative manner. In history, many systems were invented, but like the Wright brothers' experiments, they failed after some time. They flew for 800 years, or 200 years, or 50 years, and then they fell. Today, we enjoy the fruits of their experimentation. United States law had its start in the minds of the Founding Fathers. These men were well read in history and took the lessons of the past as a warning to not repeat the same mistakes. Herodotus was right. It did pay to record history in a factual manner. We did learn from mankind's mistakes. We have prospered as a result. And so our system of justice evolved through thought and experimentation as our best guess to the problem of negative change. We have learned that law must bound the activity, the actions of people, and that infractions should be cured through a system that is fair, the system of justice. This system is necessary in order to teach the people the interpreted, ideal, balanced behavior, a behavior that hopefully would produce happiness and prosperity for all, reminiscent of the old kingdom in Egypt. The lesson of negative actions. Let's face it, we all have to be negative sometimes. We can't avoid it. A child may scream for no apparent reason until our harmony is disrupted to a state of near insanity. As a supervisor, we may have to reprimand an employee in order to get him to work a little harder. We may have to fire someone and disrupt their lives. We may be in a disagreement with someone and feel like stating firmly our ideas, in essence suggesting that they were wrong. It is necessary to be negative sometimes. But how should we approach this distasteful problem? Should we close our eyes, keep positive, and avoid all confrontations? Maybe the disruption will disappear magically. Should we run from the enemy and hide our heads in the sand? Maybe we should kill anyone standing in our way. After all, aren't we right and everyone else wrong? I'm afraid neither extreme will work for any significant length of time. The moderate behavior has the best chance of success. That is to say, we must develop a due process of negative actions for most common situations. At the very least, 3 stages should be developed in order to rectify the dispute. We should not insult another in front of his peers. If we must insult someone, we should do it in private and allow him to save face. This is the least negative way. On the other hand, if an individual or creature does not take heed, then we have every right to escalate the negative attack to the appropriate level, if it is worth it. Heated emotion has no part in the initial stages of the least negative approach. We must stay calm and state the facts in a wise manner. Thereafter, if due process has run its course, it may be necessary to combine action with heated emotion in order to achieve the desired result. In this manner, the least destruction prevails. All have the opportunity to learn the lessons of harmonious behavior, utilizing a least negative approach. Some may benefit materially for their injury, while others may learn lessons for the next time. Hopefully, the right lessons are learned. In any case, overreacting may produce revenge cycles, which backfire on us eventually. Therefore, it is in our own self-interest to learn and invent the appropriate techniques in order to apply this principle. At the very least, when imbalance occurs, we should stop ourselves from following our womb service impulses. We should be patient and get our way in due process, as Ananke suggests. The lesson of honesty. Is honesty the best policy? Does telling the truth benefit us? Should we lie all the time to get our way? We have obviously encountered another set of extreme behaviors, another set of opposites. They do pop up everywhere, don't they? To lie or not to lie, that is the question. But what is the answer? Once again, we can seek guidance through the Ananke patterns. The patterns suggest that the extremes are never the solution. They can never endure. They are not the balancing point of the concept. Utilizing the logic of Ananke leads us to believe that some combination of lying and telling the truth would be the best approach for everyone's welfare. Since the truth is composed of negative and positive facts, perhaps we should just tell the positive side of the truth only. Perhaps the positive side should be exposed first and then a couple of negatives to make it more believable. Maybe some positive and negative truths mixed in with some positive lies. How do we decide on the right combination? Do we just mix it half and half? Should we allow ourselves to stretch the truth only? After all, we remember the truth, whereas lies are harder to remember. They don't somehow logically fit into the entire story. Perhaps we should stick to telling half-truths. It's harder to get caught, and you can't be condemned for lying. Are half-truths lies? What is the moderate position that will maximize the benefit to all? Perhaps we can analyze this concept in the following manner. We are faced with this dilemma due to the fact that we are involved in some sort of people situation. We don't lie or tell half-truths to particles or plants. We try to deceive our pets sometimes, but they catch on pretty fast. It's only in people situations that we really face this problem. But we know the goal of all people situations, that is, peace and harmony for all. It is when we have caused imbalance to others or vice versa that we are faced with the problem of honesty. If we were Ananke and faced with the situation of imbalance, how would we recover to the desired equilibrium position? Would we not use the least negative principle? In the light of the above thought, we are allowed the tools of lies, half-truths, as well as our perceived truths. And it's perceived. We don't know if they're absolutely true. The trick is in applying these tools to the situation in order to promote the maximum possible peace and harmony for all involved. This does not mean being greedy and selfish and lying our way out of situations. We must be fair and just in the outcomes that we wish to produce. Above all, we must use the least amount of lying and half-truths while making sure that our truths don't damage others too much. In other words, we can use all the tools as long as the least harm results over the entire episode. The process must be least negative, and the end result must be beneficial for all involved in the situation. We have now completed our investigation into the 4 patterns of the Ananke as it applies to ordinary human emotions and concerns. I hope that the reader is closer to being convinced that our emotions and people events that surround us are only subsets or mere substitutions into the formula of the order. It hopefully has been demonstrated that feelings and human activities are being guided by the 4 primary patterns of balance, change, opposites, and efficiency, and that this direction has a singular purpose of harmony and peace for all. It should be mentioned that we all have experienced the 4 patterns many times during our lives. We have promoted peace and harmony numerous times. We have benefited ourselves while purposely or inadvertently harming or causing imbalance to others. We have stood up for what was right and opposed those who thought differently. We have tried to achieve our own happiness as fast and as painlessly as possible. The patterns are not new. They are old friends that have been with us since birth. The primal disturbance. We did not know that they were along for the ride. However, we now are aware that they exist and that direction and purpose prevails, at least in this phase of the universe. So what do we do with this concept? How do we improve our lives? How do we go with the flow? I'm just checking the time. Got probably another 5 or 10 minutes. Going with the flow of Ananke. In this section, I wish to interpret the 4 patterns as they apply to our daily lives. We shall start the discussion with the pattern of negative change. Negative change is inevitable. Things will break. Things do decay. We will feel pain. We will get old. Our apparent free will lies in our reaction to these negative disturbances and the knowledge of our own personal ideal balancing points. Our challenge is to develop techniques that we can utilize in order to get ourselves back into balance in the most efficient way. Our challenge is to improve our state of physical and mental balance, thereby lowering the amount of pain that we will experience. However, we must accept this least amount of negative change. We must realize that in the ultimate, some pain is inevitable. Since we all experience disturbances daily, it would be logical to discuss some recovery techniques. Many books are written on the subject of relaxation, therefore I will not go into the suggestions in detail. I recommend some research in a local library in order to uncover techniques that you can live with. Here are some of my favorites. 1. A 20-minute nap in the car with some restful music playing on the cassette deck, or CDs now. This was back in 1985. Just close your eyes, listen to the relaxation tape, and let your mind go. 2. A 5-minute nap in the car before entering the house. It calms the nerves, gets you ready for the deluge of requests and concerns that you undoubtedly will absorb. Exercise or a visit to the gym 3 times a week. This is great for working off frustration and anger. It usually makes you feel better than when you entered the exercise facility. Plus, it increases your body's physical balancing point to a less painful level. 4. A 20-minute walk in a quiet, safe, pretty-to-the-eye place. A safe park, a zoo, a botanical garden, a beach, a calm neighborhood, and the like will do. 5. A weekend picnic or a walk in the country, the location being no more than a half an hour away. An hour away, I said, actually. 6. A mini vacation which requires only Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Pick a location less than 3 hours away and stay in a motel for 3 days, 2 nights. Investigate the area for better accommodations and local attractions. If you get 2 weeks off per year, you can take one long vacation that may bomb, or you can take 10 mini vacations and obtain a more restful, relaxed year. Now that we know some techniques to recover from negative change, shouldn't we be satisfied? Of course not. We should strive to get ourselves in a better balanced condition so that we can eliminate some of the causes of the disturbances. The remaining negativism will have to be accepted, but we don't have to accept all the pain that we are experiencing now. We can change by getting ourselves to a higher state of balance. Some areas to work on are as follows. 1. Physical balance. We all need more exercise and less food. So let's incorporate this goal into our weekly schedule. Let's eat better, exercise at least 3 times a week. Financial balance. If we like our jobs and realize that that what we do is helping others get to their balancing points, then our protection, our liquid funds can be minimized to 3 months' living expenses. The months of living expense should cover a reasonable worst-case scenario, laid off and wife not working. It should give you time to find another good job in a relaxed way. On the other hand, a disliked job should be changed when you have built up liquid funds for the task at hand. Under no circumstances should there be a need for overextending ourselves. This only produces slavery and sets us up for numerous disturbances and pain. Living below our means will not produce wealth, but it will produce peace of mind in the present. If we can't afford investments and some liquid cash flow, then we shouldn't invest. Otherwise, we will be dependent on our jobs to the extreme, consequently losing our freedom of choice. I somehow think that losing our freedom for a chance at making more money that we probably don't need is not worth it. Remember, money buys very few long-term feelings. Money is a reward, not a goal under Ananke. It is the profit and not the necessity of a happy life. It buys highs for the most part. 3. The good job. There can be no doubt that the best thing we can do is find a worthwhile job, a job or career that sincerely helps us, helps others in society get back to their balancing points. This is the win-win. Others win by our service and we win by the money and feelings that we receive. If we settle for less, then we will endure more pain than is necessary. If we are in a good job, then we should realize our service, be proud of it, and feel good. We should serve with a smile and the intent of helping. If we are not in a good job, then it is our obligation to search until we find one. Number 4, the peaceful home. This is probably the most important goal of all. Our home should be a refuge from the outside world and not the source of disturbance. Inharmonious behavior should be corrected in a least negative manner. Positive time should be spent with family members. Peaceful, positive coexistence should be our goal. Understanding Ananke and approaching happiness. This is the last section I'll read on this particular module. Hopefully we're done with this chapter. We now know some techniques and goals that can help us go with the flow of this Ananke. But how can we interpret and learn more about this Ananke by ourselves? What should we look for? We know the 4 patterns, but its manifestations are confusing. How can we understand more? Very simply speaking, Ananke reveals itself through logic and emotions and observational data. It requires us to be physically strong in order to endure its teachings. When we feel pain, we are required to discover the source of the imbalance. possibly our own shortcomings. We must discover the proper moderate position for all the dimensions in our lives, and then we must get there in a least negative way. We can increase our communication with Ananke by improving the logical and emotional aspects of our brain. We can improve our logic through education, especially through math and science. We can improve our emotions by exposing them to our family, friends, business, associates, and all people interactions. We expose our emotions by sharing our feelings with regard to the situation at hand. Please note that feelings should be revealed in a least negative manner and not by the use of a shouting match or degrading remarks. Once we become sensitized to Ananke, we must actively use the concepts to resolve the challenges that it throws our way. We must apply the principles to new as well as old situations. With each lesson that we learn, 2 new ones will emerge. These lessons being our unique moderation points that get us closer to a well-balanced life. Theoretically, the more balancing points that we learn and incorporate into our behaviors, the happier we will be. And now we'll be up to chapter 4 in the next part, so this is a good position to stop. So let me go onto the camera and say goodbye for right now, and see you on, I guess, part 8, the next chapter. Bye-bye.